vicissitudes of life, there is nothing that sometimes we can do about it. They are natural phenomenon. So once again, we want to appreciate all of you. If you are happy to be here, just turn to your brother, your sister, and say you are most welcome. Thank you. I'm also telling myself I'm also most welcome. Thank you very much. Yes, so as we are made aware by the Executive Director of Solidaire Ghana, and that is being re-echoed by our chairperson, Professor Rosina Foley, we are here today for a very simple assignment, to think about Mother Ghana, to do some reflections, introspections, analysis of ourselves, and to know whether we are going in the right direction. The topic for today is very, very interesting. It's going to be very insightful and captivating. Political parties, original vision, and current realities. It's going to be very interesting and wonderful. In as much as we remain in Ghana and in the world, definitely we are going to be governed. And then leaders come through the vehicle of what? Political parties. They are elected, they come into power, and then they govern. Now, every political party in Ghana, luckily for us, or let's say some way, somehow, we have enjoyed what we call the duopoly. It is either the National Democratic Congress or the New Patriotic Party for so many years. All these political parties have what we call visions, ideologies, ideals, and principles. Whether they have lived up to expectation is what we are going to look at today. The vision that they set out, whether they have lived to those visions or whether there was a shift in the vision set out. So, luckily for us, we have a very important personality, a global icon of course, and somebody who is very passionate about issues of this nature, who has the growth of the country at heart, who believes in what? In good governance, who believes in what? Accountability and probity, and then who shares, in the plight of the common Ghanaian. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker for today's program on the topic, Political Parties, Original Vision, and Current Realities. Professor Kwaku Asare, the whole world, from Asia to America to Australia to Africa to wherever, he is popularly known as Professor Kwaku Azar. I hope you have heard the name before. It's a household name. There's another name, eh? The year. The year, right. Everybody has heard this name before. Professor Kwaku Azar is a Democracy and Development Fellow in Public Law and Justice at the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana. He is also the KPMG Professor of Accounting at the Fisher School of Accounting, University of Florida. So you see the blend. Professor Azar is a leading public intellectual, legal scholar. His work has helped shape Ghana's governance and constitutional law landscape, including several landmark cases before the Supreme Court of Ghana, public interest litigation. Among them is the 2017 challenge to the law school entrance examination regime. And then as a result of that, there are a lot of reforms that are being made in the system. I hope you appreciate that. A frequent commentator on national affairs, he writes and speaks extensively on constitutionalism, accountability, and the rule of law, STEM education, and national character. Ladies and gentlemen, if I want to go on with the accolades, the credentials, and all the things he's achieved, I don't think we're going to leave this auditorium. Then I may have to just step aside the lecture and read his credentials. So without wasting much time, ladies and gentlemen, With a standing ovation and a clap offering, shall we all welcome Professor Kwaku Azar. Prof, you are most welcome.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you for that remarkably generous introduction. If I'm smart, I probably should sit down and allow that introduction to carry the day because the introduction was so gracious. It leaves me with the difficult task of striking a semblance between the person who now speaks and the person who has been described. I'm deeply grateful for your kind words and can only hope that I can live up to the expectation that you have kindly set up. I will certainly do my best. Madam Chairperson, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow vandals, good morning, still morning. It is a privilege to join you today as we reflect on the vision that gave birth to our political parties, the realities that now confront them, and the future we still hope to build through them. Before we get into the serious business of political discourse, allow me to begin with a story, something a little lighter, but very familiar to all of us. A woman is riding in a trotro, trapped in the middle of circle traffic. Frustrated, she turns to the man beside her and says, "Excuse me, I promised a friend I'd meet him, but honestly, I don't even know where I am." The man responds, "Oh, you're on the Odona stretch, about 5 kilometers north of Independence Square." The woman shakes her head and retorts, "Ah, you must be NDC." The surprised man responds, "I am. How do you know?" She replies, "Because everything you said is technically correct, but completely useless. I'm still stuck in the same traffic." The man chuckles and fires back, "Then you must be MPP." The puzzled woman responds, "Yes, but how did you know?" The man replies, "Because you made a hot promise to meet your friend. You made commitments you couldn't keep since you don't even know how to get there. And now you expect me to solve your problem. You are still in the same traffic you were in before, but somehow you want to blame me for it." At this point, the whole trotro comes alive. Some passengers clap for the NDC man, others cheer for the NPP woman. Suddenly, the entire bus is divided, forgetting that all of them are still sweating together in the same traffic. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Ghanaian politics in one trotro. Noise without movement, heat without progress, division without direction, everybody shouting, nobody listening, and all of us still stuck in traffic. We laugh at this story because it feels familiar. One party gives us correct but useless data, the other fills us with promises that evaporate. That is the tragedy of our politics. We've all become part of the problem, taking sides, defending politicians as if they put food on our tables. But in truth, the ordinary Ghanaian, like that woman in the trotro, remains stuck, still searching for jobs, decent schools, better roads, and quality hospitals. As the Akan proverb goes, "Bribi ankoka papa, Anka papa anye kyerɛ, literally meaning if nothing had touched the dried palm frond, it would not have made a sound. In plain words, there is a cause for every effect. The effect here, we are all stuck in the same trotro, stuck in the same traffic, stuck in the same arguments, and after all the noise, we are still not moving. But now who caused them? I contend that it's caused by our politics, our politicians, and ourselves. For we enable both the politics and the politicians. Together, they form the unholy trinity of our political dysfunction. My talk examines how this unholy trinity fits a vicious cycle of democratic decline and concludes on the note that until we demand better, the trotro will keep moving, but it will never arrive. Now, let's get into the heart of the matter. I've been asked to discuss the role of political parties in Ghana, the original vision that guided their creation, the reality of how they function today, and what reforms might restore their intended purpose. This is no small task, for political parties are not just organizations. They are the engines of our democracy, shaping governance, leadership, and even our collective values. So how do we make sense of this engine, the design, its wear and tear, and its possible repair? I'll do so in three parts. First, the vision that inspired the creation of political parties. Second, the realities of contemporary party politics, their causes and their consequences. And third, the reforms that could restore parties to their intended democratic purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, before we judge the reality of our political parties today, we must first remember the vision that created them. History matters because it tells us what political parties were supposed to be and why their shortcomings today matter so much. The story begins even before independence. Political parties in that era were not born primarily out of abstract democratic theory. They emerged, as the chairperson pointed out, as vehicles of anti-colonial mobilization and nation building. The UGCC sought constitutional reform and self-government in the shortest possible time. The CPP transformed that struggle into a mass political movement, demanding self-government now. Long before parties became electoral organizations, they were instruments of national liberation. That history shaped what Ghanaians expected of political parties. They were expected not merely to contest elections, but to mobilize citizens, forge national unity, develop leaders, and transform political independence into social and economic progress. Politics was not viewed simply as a competition for power. It was part of the broader project of nation building. Yet, from the very beginning, Ghana confronted a question that will shape much of its constitutional history. How do we build a strong and united nation without destroying democratic competition? We wanted unity, yes, but we also wanted freedom. We wanted national purpose, yes, but we also wanted opposition. We wanted strong government, yes, but we also wanted accountable government. Reconciling those aspirations proved far more difficult than achieving independence itself. When independence arrived in 1957, those aspirations were embedded within a constitutional framework. We adopted the Westminster parliamentary system, a model borrowed from Britain, and adapted to Ghana's circumstances. The vision was not simply electoral competition. It was a system of dispersed power, democratic accountability, and national participation. Faced with demands for federalism from the National Liberation Movement and concerns about national unity, the colonial authorities crafted a constitutional compromise. Ghana would remain a unitary state, but meaningful powers would be exercised through regional assemblies. The arrangement sought to balance national cohesion with regional participation. Power was not supposed to reside only in Accra. Regional and local institutions were expected to play a meaningful role in governance. Political parties were to operate at every level of the democratic process, competing nationally, governing locally, and connecting citizens to the state. The governing party would govern, the opposition would scrutinize, criticize, and offer alternatives. On paper, it was an ambitious and even beautiful vision. Yet, the imported model carried an inherent tension. It was borrowed from Britain and planted into a society with fragile institutions, uneven national integration, and a political culture shaped by anti-colonial struggle. Liberation movements are naturally organized around unity, mobilization, and common purpose. Constitutional democracy requires something more difficult: acceptance of permanent opposition, organized disagreement, and the legitimacy of competing visions of national development. That tension surfaced immediately. The first major test came when political actors were asked to live within the constitutional compromise they had inherited. In practice, neither side embraced it. The opposition viewed it as an inadequate substitute for federalism. The CPP regarded it as an unwelcome constraint on national consolidation. The constitutional compromise became a political battleground rather than a shared settlement. The regional assemblies were intended to disperse power. Instead, they became an early casualty of the struggle to concentrate it. The tragedy of the 1957 Constitution was not that it lacked a compromise. It was that the compromise lacked constitutional believers. Both sides accepted the settlement. Neither side truly embraced it. The lesson was profound constitutional design alone cannot sustain democracy unless political actors accept the legitimacy of organized opposition. The same tension appeared in debates over political parties. The early years revealed the dangers of ethnic, regional, and religious fragmentation. In response, the Avoidance of Discrimination Act prohibited parties organized on those bases. That principle survives today in Article 55 of the Constitution. Political parties must be national, not ethnic. Yet, the story was more complicated than a simple struggle between nationalism and sectionalism. Before the act took effect, many regional opposition parties merged to form the UP, or the United Party, creating a broader national opposition coalition. The deeper challenge was not simply preventing ethnic politics. It was cultivating a democratic culture that accepted organized opposition as a legitimate and permanent feature of political life. That lesson, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid, was not learned. The move to an executive presidency in 1960 concentrated power in the presidency. By 1964, Ghana had become a one-party state. The consequences were sobering. Centralized power could deliver ambitious national projects, but it could also weaken opposition. narrow political competition, and erode institutional restraints. The coup of 1966 revealed a recurring truth of Ghanaian politics. When democratic institutions weaken and opposition collapses, the military often emerges as the final veto player. What followed was nearly 3 decades of constitutional experimentation. Civilian rule returned, collapsed, returned again, and collapsed again. Constitutions came and went, governments came and went, yet the underlying question remained unresolved. Are political parties part of the solution or part of the problem? That debate reached its peak under General Achampon's proposal for Unigov, a no-party system of government. The argument was simple. Political parties were portrayed as divisive, destabilizing, and the source of conflict. Why not eliminate them altogether? The proposal generated intense controversy. Many citizens saw it not as a democratic innovation, but as a mechanism for prolonging military rule. Yet, the Unigov debate served an important purpose. It forced Ghana to confront a deeper question. If political parties are imperfect, what is the alternative? Over time, the answer became increasingly clear. Neither one party nor no party rule had succeeded in resolving Ghana's democratic challenges. We still wanted participation, we still wanted representation, we still wanted a voice, we still wanted political parties, and so, during the transition to constitutional rule, nationwide consultations were organized through the National Commission for Democracy. From village derbas to university halls, citizens delivered a remarkably consistent message. Bring back political parties, but not as tribal machines, not as private clubs, and not as vehicles for corruption and patronage. They wanted parties that were democratic, accountable, national in character, and connected to the people. Out of that process emerged the 1992 Constitution, a settlement built on the lessons of both one-party rule and no-party rule. The framers had learned from both extremes. Ghana would be neither a one-party state nor a no-party state. Political parties will return, but under constitutional discipline. Article 55 guarantees the right to form and join political parties while requiring them to be national in character, internally democratic, transparent in their finances, and subject to constitutional regulation. Article 3 rejects the possibility of a one-party state. Together, these provisions reflect the central lessons of Ghana's constitutional journey. National unity and democratic competition are not enemies. A successful democracy requires both. In a sense, Ghana had finally answered the question that had confronted it since independence. The challenge was not choosing between unity and competition. It was building institutions capable of sustaining both. The vision was clear because the framers understood a profound truth. Democracy requires organized disagreement. Political parties were not meant merely to contest elections. They were meant to unite the nation, resolve disagreements peacefully, develop leaders, hold governments accountable, offer genuine alternatives, and channel political competition through ideas rather than identities. The question before us today is whether our political parties still fulfill that constitutional mission or whether they have drifted so far from their original purpose that they now threaten the very democracy they were created to sustain. That is the vision. Having revisited that vision, became concentration of power. Mass mobilization became partisan tribalism. Political organization became political patronage. And the struggle to liberate the state gradually gave way to a struggle to capture it. What began as movements for self-government and national development increasingly evolved into organizations preoccupied with electoral victory, patronage distribution, and control of state power. I will focus on only 4 defining features of our political parties today: the duopoly, monocracy, partisan tribalism, and capture of national institutions. Together, these 4 features, in my mind, explain much of what has gone wrong in our democracy. First, the duopoly. Multi-party democracy was supposed to give us choice, real choice, competition of ideas, alternative visions for national development. But in practice, our multi-party democracy has narrowed into an NDC-NPP duopoly. Since 1992, power has alternated between these 2 parties, producing 4 peaceful transfers of power in 2000, 2008, 2016, and 2024. And yes, peaceful transfers matter. Whatever our frustrations today, political parties have accomplished one thing that previous constitutional orders struggled to achieve: the peaceful transfer of power through the ballot box. No coup, no suspension of the constitution, no soldiers deciding who governs. That achievement should not be minimized. It is one of the great successes of the Fourth Republic. But over time, stability has hardened into rigidity. Smaller parties exist, but let us be honest, they are tolerated more than they are taken seriously. For many voters, elections no longer feel like contests of ideas. They feel like choices between the lesser of 2 evils. We keep changing drivers, but never fixing the vehicle. The same trotro, the same potholes, the same arguments, and Ghanaians know it. Afrobarometer surveys consistently show that fewer than 1 in 5 Ghanaians trust political parties. Think about that. In a constitutional democracy built around political parties, fewer than 20% of citizens trust the very institutions meant to represent them. Second, monocracy and godfathers. Political parties no longer thrive primarily on ideology or service. Too often, they thrive on money, on financiers, on patrons, on godfathers, men who never appear on the ballot, quietly determine who gets nominated. In some constituencies, aspirants whisper that they cannot even pick up nomination forms without the blessing of a financier. The ballot paper may carry the candidate's photograph, but the real power often lives in a mansion far from the polling station. Nowhere is this clearer than the explosion of nomination fees. In one case, a presidential aspirant was expected to pay 4 million cedis. 4 million cedis. I thought that was ridiculous until last week I did a presentation at the University of Ghana, the political science department, and the students told me they spend 500,000 cedis on an SRC election. 500,000 cedis on an SRC election. You got to be kidding me. And nobody pauses to ask, how is that money raised? What promises are made before leadership even begins? Worse still, these fees are often defended with a dangerous argument that any serious presidential candidate should be able to raise such money, as if leadership were a test of wealth rather than vision, a test of bank accounts rather than competence, a test of fundraising rather than public trust. When ambition is measured in money, politics changes completely. Leadership becomes investment. Public office becomes asset recovery. Looting becomes the repayment plan, and the state itself becomes the marketplace for reinvestment. And the influence does not stop at nominations. Without a godfather, it becomes difficult to secure even the most basic opportunities: jobs, contracts, scholarships, appointment to boards. Ordinary party members quickly learn a painful lesson. Loyalty to a financier matters more than loyalty to the nation. And so, ladies and gentlemen, public service slowly stops being about competence, vision, or integrity. It becomes about connections. Who knows whom? Who financed whom? Who paid whose way? That, my friends, is not democracy. That is a political kingdom masquerading as a democracy. And meanwhile, the drivers may change, the slogans may change, the faces may change, but the fares keep rising, and still the trotro does not move. Third, political tribalism. Our political parties have increasingly become tribes, not ethnic tribes, political tribes. Modern tribal kingdoms competing for control of the states. Members are expected to defend the tribe even when it is clearly wrong. Criticizing your own party is treated as betrayal. Defending it, even in the face of obvious wrongdoing, is celebrated as loyalty. In a healthy democracy, citizens ask, is it true? In a tribal democracy, they ask, whose side are you on? Winning elections, therefore, becomes a matter of life and death. Not because citizens disagree profoundly about policy, but because political victory has the power to decide who eats and who waits outside the gate. Political affiliation becomes a hidden passport to jobs, to contracts, to scholarships, to opportunity itself. Once politics becomes a contest for us, condemned yesterday becomes visionary tomorrow. Politics begin to resemble football fanaticism. People cheer their side, boo the other, and never switch jerseys. Foot soldiers remain poor, yet many become convinced that it's better to be poor under their own tribe than prosper under another. That is the power of tribal politics. It persuades people to defend arrangements that do not even serve their own interests. And because loyalty matters more than performance, slogans increasingly substitute for results. Every administration arrives with a new anti-corruption banner: probity and accountability, zero tolerance for corruption, I don't care whose ox is God, the Anas principle, Operation Recover All Loot. Different slogans, different branding, yet somehow looting remains remarkably resilient. What should have been national service becomes regime service, and democratic competition degenerates into rival kingdoms competing for the same spoils. Fourth, party capture of national institutions. Political parties were never intended to govern every sphere of national life. They were meant to compete for political power. Instead, they have increasingly extended their tentacles into institutions that are supposed to belong to the Republic. The result is a gradual colonization of national institutions by partisan interests. The Electoral Commission is viewed through partisan lenses. The judiciary is viewed through partisan lenses. The media is viewed through partisan lenses. Civil society is viewed through partisan lenses. Even churches, mosques, chiefs, universities, and professional associations are increasingly drawn into partisan camps. Everyone is placed in a box. Everyone is expected to declare a side. And anyone who refuses is often suspected of secretly belonging to the other side. Students divide themselves into 10 and TESCON. Lawyers divide themselves into partisan camps. The media increasingly shifts from watchdog to cheerleaders. Civil society that once challenged governments is often accused of speaking only when its preferred party is out of power. Even our civil service and state-owned enterprises increasingly struggle to maintain political neutrality. The tragedy is not merely that institutions become partisan. The deeper tragedy is that citizens stop trusting them. A ruling from a court is no longer judged on its reasoning. An electoral decision is no longer judged on its legality. A public statement is no longer judged on its truth. Instead, citizens ask a different question. Whose side are they on? When institutions lose their independence, democracy loses its referees. And when democracy loses its referees, every contest becomes a tribal battle. Perhaps the deepest tragedy is what this culture is doing to the next generation. Our youth are increasingly being socialized not into civic citizenship, but into partisan apprenticeship. And if the next generation inherits only partisan identities and no shared national institutions, our democracy has no future. Ladies and gentlemen, you should ask, why have these features emerged? Because it's not enough to describe the disease. We must diagnose it. These problems are not random. They are the predictable outcomes came from the origins of our political parties themselves. They emerged, as Madam Chairperson said, as movements of national liberation and nation building before they became ordinary electoral organizations. They were designed to mobilize and unify, not necessarily to tolerate permanent opposition. Those origins gave them extraordinary strength, the ability to mobilize citizens, forge collective purpose, and pursue ambitious national goals. But they also left behind habits that sit uneasily with constitutional. The parties inherited a highly centralized state. The colonial system was designed for control, not participation. Independence changed who occupied the state. Repeated constitutional interruptions. Governments came and went. Constitutions came and went. Strain. The promise of dispersed power was never fully realized. Local governments remained weak. Resources remained concentrated in Accra, and major decisions continued to flow from the center. As more authority accumulated in the presidency, political parties naturally focused their energies on capturing the center rather than building strong local institutions. Our winner-takes-all presidency intensified the problem. When losing an election can mean losing access to appointment, contracts, influence, and opportunity, politics stops being preference and starts becoming survival. Opponents become enemies. Compromise becomes weakness. Elections become high-stakes contests because too much depends on who controls one office. Money then rushed into the vacuum created by weak enforcement. Campaigns became expensive. Financiers became indispensable. Ideas gave way to investments. Political office increasingly came to be seen not simply as an opportunity for service, but as an opportunity for access. And over time, citizens themselves adapted to the system. Loyalty increasingly displaced merit. Partisanship displaced principle. Access displaced competence. Too many citizens began seeking through party connections what they could not reliably obtain through institutions. What we call today's political reality is therefore less a surprise than a system functioning almost exactly as it was incentivized to function. The consequences. So these are the roots of our political dysfunction. History that burdens us, structures that reward zero-sum competition, money that drowns out ideas, and a culture that prizes loyalty over principle. But roots do not stay hidden. They always bear fruit. And the fruits of this system are bitter. The features we have traced are not harmless quirks of Ghanaian politics. They carry real and visible costs. They shape how leaders govern, how institutions behave, and how citizens experience daily life. Let us turn now to those consequences. First, accountability dies when loyalty to the king outweighs loyalty to the constitution. Leaders feel untouchable and corruption thrives unchecked. Second, progress stalls when policies are judged by party jersey rather than merit. While some countries pursue mass housing and broad-based development, we too often convert public assets into private privilege. The former is nation building, the latter is self-dealing. And what I mean by this is if they take public land somewhere and then distribute it to themselves. That's what I'm talking about. Third, divisions deepen when citizens stop seeing one another as fellow countrymen and begin to see enemies, turning by-elections that should be civic routines into national security crisis. Worse still, division is reproduced as young activists are socialized into partisan warfare rather than problem solving. Politics becomes a toxic apprenticeship in animosity. Fourth, inequality grows when the few capture the spoils and the many remain poor, yet console themselves with the mantra, better to be poor under my tribe than prosper under theirs. Fifth, good people exit when the principled and competent are dismissed as non-loyalists, leaving opportunists and charlatans to dominate the field. This is the culture of sycophancy, where applause is rewarded more than honesty, where criticism is treated as betrayal, and where leaders slowly become prisoners of praise instead of servants of truth. Sixth, as blind loyalty flourishes, truth becomes the casualty. Partisans cheer bad policies if their king supports them, and boo good ones if the other king proposes them. Facts are twisted into propaganda, and evidence gives way to partisan convenience. 7, institutions lose public trust. Court decisions become suspect. Electoral outcomes become contested. News reporting becomes suspect as the media shifts from watchdog to cheerleader. Citizens lose confidence that any referee shapes not only our politics, but also how our elites are formed. In healthy societies, wealth is created by building businesses, creating jobs, financing innovation, and expanding productive enterprise. When elites prosper by producing, they demand good roads, reliable electricity, quality schools, efficient courts, and strong institutions, because their success depends on the nation's success. But in ours, weaker political systems, wealth flows less from production than from political access. Inflated contracts, import monopolies, land speculation, patronage, and proximity to power. Once political proximity becomes the quickest route to wealth, election ceases to be contests of ideas and becomes battles for controls of the state itself. The consequences are visible everywhere. Luxury estates besides collapsing schools, billionaire lifestyles besides graduate unemployment, expensive vehicles beside broken roads, elite consumption besides weak industrialization. That is no accident. We have built a system that rewards political access more than innovation, display more than contribution, and proximity to power more than productive achievement. What kind of government does such a system produce? Ladies and gentlemen, almost inevitably, it produces governments in which nepotism and cronyism become the operating system. Appointments and opportunities are distributed not according to merit or the common good, but according to loyalty to the tribe and bloodlines to the chief. We do not even pretend otherwise. We have coined a familiar label, the family and friends government. And from there, the slide into every imaginable cracy or governance reduced to procurement deals instead of national progress, and chobocracy or governance reduced to deals rather than ideals. And what do all these crises produce? Government that rewards loyalty more effectively than they solve problems. Floods return, harvest rot, corruption survives every slogan, and galamsey keeps destroying our rivers and forests. And that is how our democracy degenerates into what I call an imdieyecracy, a democratic shell powered by an autocratized, corrupt, and exclusionary engine. Our politics no longer exists to solve problems. It increasingly exists to manufacture problems. Our parties were meant to be the engines of democracy. Instead, they become engines of patronage, polarization, and profiteering. Unless we name this reality and confront it, we will remain trapped on this partisan merry-go-round of hypocrisy and self-destruction. The trotro will keep idling at circle, engine running, horn blaring, passengers arguing, but the nation will go nowhere. Let me have a sip of water. Let's now talk about the recoveries that can bring parties back to their purpose. We cannot remain stuck in the trotro of division. We spent enough time diagnosing the disease. The question now is whether Ghana is willing to take the medicine. The reforms I propose are not revolutionary, they are restorative. They seek to recover the best elements of our political inheritance, the capacity to mobilize citizens, pursue national development, and build a common purpose without reproducing the centralized power, patronage, and exclusion that accompany that inheritance. The country needs 5 recoveries. First, recover the parties, the political parties. Second, recover the state. Third, recover parliament. Fourth, recover citizenship. And the last one, recover development. Collectively, these 5 recoveries seek to restore the proper relationship between parties, the state, parliament, citizen, and development itself. Oops. The first task is to recover the political parties themselves. A cracked pot cannot carry clean water. If our parties are undemocratic at home, they cannot deliver democracy to the nation. So parties must return to ideas, not personalities. Manifestos must stop being seasonal poetry. They must become credible blueprints for governing. Loyalty must be anchored in values, not personalities. Where you stand should not depend on where you sit in the parties. And inside the parties themselves, democracy must be real, not staged. That means redefining what qualifies a candidate. Instead of demanding millions in cash, parties should demand thousands in citizens' confidence. Require aspirants to secure verified endorsement from members across all regions. That way, only those with genuine grassroots reach and organizational capacity qualify. Money does not prove seriousness. Mobilization does. Any rich person can write a check, but few can persuade thousands of citizens to sign their names behind a vision. Democracy should test leadership through mobilization, not monetization. The cocoa season for a handful of delegates must give way to genuine participation by all members. When the rank and file have a voice, parties will finally reflect ordinary Ghanaians, not only kingmakers. And reform must include inclusion. Our parties are full of godfathers, but where are the godmothers? Where are the women? Where are the youth? Where are the marginalized groups in the candidate pipelines and decision rooms? A democracy that sidelines half its citizens cannot claim full legitimacy. Finally, party reform requires rules. Even the best driver needs brakes and traffic lights. We must cap campaign spending, shorten election seasons, audit party accounts, and impose rare consequences for violations. Ghana needs an independent commissioner of political parties with power to regulate, investigate, and enforce the law. Without enforcement, laws are slogans. With enforcement, laws become the backbone of democracy. Second, recover the state. The state belongs to all Ghanaians. Governments come and go. The state must remain. When the walls between party and state collapse, public institutions become partisan tools, and the nation pays the price. As the proverb says, a knife that cuts for one side cannot be trusted to cut straight. Political parties must compete for power, but they must not become the state. Let me repeat that. Political parties must compete for power, but they must not become the state. Party machines must not embed themselves in state structures. Public service must be depoliticized. Appointments, promotions, and decisions must return to neutrality and merit. The civil service must serve governments faithfully without becoming an extension of party machinery. State-owned enterprises must also be recovered. Their boards should be appointed primarily for competence and independence, not partisan loyalty. A party chairman should not simultaneously chair the board of a state-owned enterprise. The referee cannot wear a team jersey. The Auditor General, SHRAJ, the OSP, and the judiciary must provide continuous oversight, fearless, impartial, and timely. Each exists to protect the republic, not the government of the day. We cannot rebuild democracy unless we first rebuild the independence of these institutions. They must be strong enough to bear the weight of public expectation, impartial enough to serve all who cross it, and steadfast enough to withstand the storms of politics. Their independence must be protected in law and respected in practice through merit-based appointments, security of tenure, adequate resources, operational autonomy, and a political culture that accepts constitutional checks as safeguards rather than obstacles. The media must reclaim its role. It must back, it must bite, it must shine light in dark corners, not echo propaganda. And civic bodies like the GBA, NOOCs, churches, chiefs, civil societies must return to their core mission: defending truth, cherishing honesty, and resisting oppression. When institutions stand tall, no party can hold Ghana hostage. When institutions stand tall, no party can hold Ghana hostage. But strong institutions alone are not enough. The law must also apply equally. Where justice bends for the powerful and bites only the powerless, democracy becomes theater, not truth. In our politics, one ritual has become too familiar. The moment a politician is wanted by law enforcement, party machinery mobilizes. Supporters gather at investigative offices. They wear party colors. They chant slogans. They call it solidarity. They call it peaceful assembly. But beneath the banners lies a dangerous creed that politicians stand above the law. This must stop. Justice must not wear party colors. Justice must not wait for regime change. Investigation and prosecution must proceed without regard to political calendar or partisan interests. When the law applies to all equally and promptly, democracy stops being performance and becomes principle. The third task is to recover parliament. Parliament was created to check the executive, not to cheer it. A parliament that fears the executive cannot protect the republic. If parliament bends too easily to party control, it becomes a rubber stamp. It cannot safeguard the national interest. A strong democracy needs a strong parliament, one that can say yes when the country is being served and no when the nation is being betrayed. One symptom of party overreach is the practice of parties demanding monthly dues from sitting MPs. This turns legislators into financiers of party machines, not representatives of the nations. When MPs are forced to subsidize their parties, their independence is compromised from the start. Parliament's independence is also compromised when MPs routinely serve on the board of state-owned enterprises. I'll repeat that. Parliament's independence is also compromised when MPs routinely serve on the boards of state-owned enterprises. A legislator cannot effectively scrutinize an institution that he or she helps govern. The constitutional role of parliament is oversight, not management. Those who hold the executive accountable should not simultaneously become part of its governing machinery. Anecdotal evidence also suggests that the choice of speaker often comes not from parliament itself, but from Jubilee House. That reflects the deep grip of the executive over the legislature. The speaker is meant to be parliament's guardian, not the president's surrogate. When parliament cannot freely choose its own speaker, independence collapses. The legislature ceases to be a check. It becomes an appendage. The same principle applies to parliamentary caucuses. Their leaders should emerge from the free choice of MPs, not from directive issues outside parliament. A legislature that cannot choose its own leaders cannot effectively check those who govern. To reclaim independence, parliaments need resources and autonomy. It needs its own professional, non-partisan budget office to answer serious questions. How much will this policy cost? What is the economic impact of this levy? These are not questions for partisans on radio panels. They are questions for trained professionals working within parliament. MPs also need proper staff, office managers, chief of staff, policy advisors, so that they can serve constituents and perform legislative duties competently. Parliament's funding must be timely and predictable. It undermines independence when MPs, or even the Speaker, must troop to the Ministry of Finance to beg for the release of its own funds. A healthy distance between party and parliament is not a luxury. It's the only way to ensure lawmakers serve the Republic first, not the ruling party in Jubilee House. The fourth task is to recover citizenship. Democracy is not something politicians do to us. It's something citizens do for themselves. A house cannot stand if its owners fall asleep. Institutions and laws form the skeleton of democracy, but civic virtue is its heartbeat. Citizens must stay awake. Citizens must stay awake. Anybody falling asleep here? Let me see. Citizens must stay vigilant. Unity must replace division. Our politics should sound like a national anthem, not a war chant. Civic education must prepare voters to be referees, not spectators waving flags. We must end the culture where citizens are mobilized as partisan shield for accused politicians. Democracy needs citizens who demand truth, not chant slogans. Citizens who defend principles, not personalities. Supporting corruption because our side did it is not loyalty, it's hypocrisy. Rare patriotism means standing by values, even when it is uncomfortable. Recovering citizenship also means protecting institutions whose moral authority depends on independence, including churches and mosques. When the altar becomes a campaign stage, religion loses prophetic voice. Politics becomes sanctified, dissent is silenced, division is blessed. When pastors and imams become political actors, they lose the moral independence to rebuke power, and citizens lose the spiritual refuge that faith communities should provide. A nation that politicizes its pulpits will soon find that it has nowhere left to pray for truth. Democracy depends on institutions that can criticize the state, not belong to it. And we can learn from ourselves. Students who debate by arguing the opposite side, market women who keep politics out of their cooperatives, communities that clean their surroundings regardless of party. They all show that progress can rise above petty politics. When institutions stand firm, when the law is blind to power, and when citizens stay awake, democracy ceases to be fragile performance. It becomes a living covenant between. The last task is to recover development. Political parties were not created merely to win elections. They were created to improve lives, better schools, better roads, better hospitals, better jobs, a cleaner environment, greater opportunity. That is the only report card by which every political party should ultimately be judged. If a political party wins elections but cannot improve lives, it has succeeded politically and failed democratically. A rising tide that lifts only yachts is not development. It is inequality with a beautiful view. True development must reach every canoe, every village, every household. The creed that must bind us is equity, not equal outcomes, but equal opportunity. Recovering development begins with continuity. Development cannot begin again every 4 years. Roads do not belong to one party. Schools do not belong to one party. Hospitals do not belong to one party. The future, too much wealth in our politics flows from proximity to power. Too little flows from innovation, enterprise, manufacturing, agriculture, and productive investment. The entrepreneur should not need a party card. The farmer should not need a godfather. The graduate should not need a political sponsor. The fastest route to success in Ghana should be productivity, not political proximity. Recovering development also requires fiscal discipline. No country develops by borrowing to consume. No country prospers when election cannot create prosperity for everyone, but it can create the conditions in which everyone has the opportunity to prosper. That means reliable electricity, quality education, secure property rights, efficient costs, predictable regulation, and institutions that reward effort rather than political connection. The true measure of development is not the wealth of those close to power, it's the opportunities available to those farthest from it. Ladies and gentlemen, none of these recoveries require perfect citizens. None requires perfect politicians. None requires a constitutional miracle. What they require is something far more attainable, sustainable public demand. But public demand alone does not produce reform. Every reform must confront a difficult reality. Those who benefit from the status quo rarely volunteer to change it. Who benefits from changing a system that rewards them? Who willingly surrenders power, patronage, or privilege? Political parties rarely give up spoils on their own. History suggests that reform succeeds only. Change often begins at pressure points, a court decision. So the question is not only what reform does Ghana need? The harder question is, who will insist on them? Who will demand them? Who will refuse to accept less? The answer ultimately is us. Not politicians acting alone, not political parties acting alone, but citizens, institutions, civil society, and a generation prepared to demand better, expect better, and build better. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude. Our political parties began as vehicles of national liberation. They inherited the mobilizing ethos of liberation movements and the machinery of a highly centralized colonial state. Over time, this fostered a politics that treated control of the state as the master key to national transformation, as though by first securing the political kingdom, everything else would be added to it. Somewhere along the way, the struggle to build the nation became a struggle to capture the state. Somewhere along the way, the struggle to build the nation became a struggle to capture the state. But the nation is not built by capturing the state. It's built by strengthening institutions, expanding opportunity, rewarding productive enterprise, and serving the public good. Until we recover our political parties, our institutions, our citizenship, and our commitment to development, the state will remain something to be conquered rather than a public trust to be governed. We began this conversation in a trotro filled with passengers arguing over politics while remaining stuck in the same traffic. Perhaps that image captures our democracy better than any constitutional theory ever could. For too long, we've mistaken partisan victory for national progress. We celebrate when our side wins. We mourn when our side loses. Yet, after the cheering ends, we all return to the same schools, the same hospitals, the same roads, the same courts, the same economy, and the same future. The truth is simple. No political party is big enough to own Ghana. And no Ghanaian should be small enough to belong to a political party more than to the Republic. The question before us is therefore not whether the NDC will win or whether the NPP will win. The question is whether Ghana will win. That depends on whether we have the courage to demand better. Better parties, better institutions, better citizenship, better leadership, and better development. The road forward is not mysterious. We know what must be done. Build parties around ideas rather than financiers. Protect institutions rather than capture them. Strengthen parliament rather than weaken it. Choose citizenship over tribalism, and measure political success not by who gains power, but by whether ordinary people gain opportunity. History shows that nations do not decline because they lack clever politicians. They decline when citizens stop demanding excellence. Every generation inherits a democracy, but no generation inherits the right to keep it. That right must be earned, protected, renewed. Now it's our turn. The wheel is in our hands. We can continue arguing over who should drive the trotro, or we can finally repair the vehicle. We can continue defending parties, or we can start defending Ghana. Political parties are means. Ghana is the end. When we forget that distinction, democracy becomes a contest for power. When we remember it, democracy becomes a vehicle for progress. And when future generations ask what we did when our democracy began to drift, let it never be said that we sat quietly in the back seat. Let it be said that we stood up, that we demanded better, that we chose country over party, and that together we helped move the trotro forward. Thank you. God bless Ghana.
I think we can do it better, we can do it better, we can do it better. Thank you very much. Let us resume our seat. This is a political sermon. You know, you could see that Professor Azar diagnosed our problems, but we also gave us some ways we can make some reforms. You know, having diagnosed them, how we can actually heal ourselves. I wasn't so much enthused about the clapping because, you know, his speech or the lecture is such that it calls for a lot of introspection. It is a clarion call on every Ghanaian. Let me stress that well-meaning Ghanaian. You know, we have had a peaceful election since 1992, 9 successive peaceful elections from 1992. He also actually spoke about peaceful transfers of power. You know, relatively, we have enjoyed peace when it comes to transfer of our governance or power. And then at least there is also a stable democracy, says so Professor Azar. But then, he diagnosed the problems of the country, of Ghana, vis-a-vis our political parties in 4 critical areas. Duopoly. You know, when we queue to vote or to cast our vote today, so mourning that if you don't have somebody who will hold your hands, the social connection, political connection, religious connection, it appears and it suggests that you are doomed as far as program. Unfortunately, because of the rains, Ireland, they had water crisis this morning. That has severely affected our attendance. And the UPSA, they're already on vacation. That notwithstanding, I assured Professor that the program is streamed live. Solidarity Ghana, we are technology people. And therefore, whether there are 2 persons, we are not afraid. Now, something interesting happened yesterday. Somebody mentioned his first name, and someone asked of the surname. So when the surname was mentioned, typically the person coming from Ashanti region. So someone asked, well, how come you are from Kumasi and you are an NDC? Political tribalism. You know, this, you know, it's in line, it's in sync with what Professor said. To the extent that if somebody is from Ashanti region, it suggests, or it appears there is no way he can be an NDC. This is serious. And then, party capture of national institution. In fact, it has eroded our system and our fabric to the extent that even pastors or religious leaders are even classified and identified politically. In Ghana, we have NDC pastors and MPP pastors. Yeah, Professor is saying so, and that is true. think it is a truism. No, is that not true? It is fact. We have NDC pastors and MPP pastors. All our institutions, from all our institutions. So basically, and then he actually also professed some reforms. We need to recover the political party, recover the state, recover parliament, recover citizenship. The citizens also need to reform their lives and then recover development. This is how far we have come. So at this juncture, we're going to have a panel discussion, which is going to be snappy. The reason being that Professor has actually gone through all the salient issues. So we're going to have some panelists who are also going to help us go through them quickly. Before that, we want to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Rashid Ibrahim, who is the BNUC's president. Mr. Rashid, you are most welcome. He just left, eh? Yes, went out. All right. And also, we want to also acknowledge the presence of the executive convener for Dynamic Youth Movement, in the person of Mr. Edward Tuto. Senior D, you are most welcome. Yes, Mr. Ibrahim, how are you doing? You are most welcome to Solidarity Ghana's lecture. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Very good. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, distinguished individuals, we are going to have a panel discussion. We're going to have very few questions. The first will center on original vision and founding intent. And we also look at current realities and consequences, and a reform and the way forward. But the question that we are asking ourselves is very simple. We are here to ask a very hard question, and that is, have Ghana's political parties drifted from why they were formed, and what does that mean for us today? Panel discussion. I will respectfully ask the ushers to give us some. The question is very simple. Whether Ghana's political parties have drifted from why they were formed, and what does that mean for us today? Now, the panel members, we are lucky to have some very important individuals here who are actually inclined as far as this lecture or this. Us here on the stage, let me briefly go through the credential of Professor Kingsley Senyo Agomo. He's a researcher in the School of Public Service and Governance at Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration, GIMPA. His work focuses on political parties, elections, governance, decentralization, and public administration in Ghana and West Africa. His recent research includes the financing and challenges of political parties in Ghana, legislative electoral incumbency, oversight and the ECOWAS Parliament, as well as COVID-19 response, decentralization and democratic consolidation in Ghana. He has published in journals such as the Journal of Legislative Statistics. Professor. So he's a governance and leadership expert. Thank you, Professor. And then again, we also have in our midst a very learned person who is with CDD Ghana, a senior research fellow who is who advocates for good governance, who also is a social commentator. If I want to go through or into the credentials, time may elude us, and for that reason, respectfully help me welcome Dr. John Osai Kwapong from CDD Ghana. Because of the nature, Prof, Doctor, you may choose yeah. That's okay, thank you. And then, our chairperson is going to play a dual role because of the knowledge she possesses. Because we have the view that her presence is going to actually help our discussion. So, chairperson, we are so sorry to inconvenience. 3 questions, 1 to each of our panel members, on original vision and founding intent. We take another 3 set of questions on current realities and consequences. And then we take the last 3 questions from reform and the way forward as a prophet by Professor Kwaku Azar. The question is that he has actually made us to understand that indeed there is a drift as far as the visions are concerned. But we are so lucky that some recommendations are also given. So on that note, this is to Professor Rosina. Okay, let me start with Professor Kingsley Agomo, because our chairperson has already spoken. So Professor, you are a leadership and a governance expert. So in that case, all right. Prof. Oh, okay. The AC. All right. Sit comfortably. Yeah. All right. So Professor Kingsley Agomo seated right here. Professor Rosina Foley, and then Dr. Osei Papon. So Professor Kingsley Agomo. So as argued by Professor Kwaku Azar, there is a belief, and we can appreciate that there is actually a drift as far as our political parties' visions are concerned. So from your expertise or from where you sit, Professor Azar argues that political parties were meant to aggregate citizen interests. Do you see them doing that today, or have they become elite clubs? According to Professor Azar, political parties were meant to aggregate citizen interests. Do you see them doing that today? Or have they become elite clubs?
Thank you. Thank you very much for, first of all, for the opportunity to be here today. It's a privilege to be part of this very important program. I'm very grateful again for the opportunity to interact with the seasoned professor, and as I see him talking, I always see myself as a foot soldier to learn. And I have learned so much from his paper. Yes, somewhere I would have just said that, oh, when a professor spoke like this, what do you expect me to say again? Because the paper has been very, very comprehensive. It touched on all these things that you're asking me to say again. He has said it. I would have said, yes, then we close. That would have been a very simple answer to give. Yeah, that's the reality. As he speaks, maybe I'll reserve that one for another. As he speaks, so many things were flipping through my mind. And like you say, it's a political sermon preacher. I pray to tap your anointing this morning so that I'll be able to deliver. Yes, it is true. Parties, when you look at political party, in any country, there are three key drivers or pillars. One is the economic or socio-cultural environment. The other one is about the legal provisions, the institutions. And the third one is the organization of the political party itself, how they organize themselves. Every political party the world over, they all say we are for development. No matter how you call it, national interest or development. That has been the chorus or the principle. But the question as to whether they have achieved it or not, he has already answered it. It has not been achieve the way citizens will like it, or if you want to do an assessment, political parties have done a lot of things that he has already catalogued, but the assessment of the achievement has a lot to desire. That's where I'll come from. And there's also, the interest has already been said, state capture, selfish interest, monetization, and all other things that, bedevil political parties have been outlined. And I'm grateful to that, and I want to say that it has not been achieved. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Professor Kingsley. All right, then, so Professor is basically saying that, the vision set out our political parties have not been achieved, basically. So, Professor Rosina, Professor Azar argues that the 1992 Constitution envisioned political parties as vehicles for national development. This is also more or less in line with what Professor Kingsley said. So where did we deviate from that vision? So where did we deviate from that vision?
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. Political parties, or the National Constitution, 1992 Constitution, has several provisions that is aimed at developing our country. And I think in Article 35 or 36, it states that when a government comes into office, 2 years after coming into office, the government must come. When we elect a new government, when they come, they have to come up with their plan. So we have seen different plans. From 1992, we actually inaugurated the Fourth Republic in 1993. So from 1993, former president, the late President Rawlings, they had the Vision 2020. And from that time, we've had several. The most recent, now we have the Better Ghana agenda. But the challenge with this is that the plans keep changing. And so even though we have a National Planning Commission, which I think during Nana Akufo-Addo's time, our former president, they came up with a long-term development plan, I think 50 years development plan. We still have to come with our political, every government that comes with their own political, I'll say politically motivated plan, development plan, which doesn't help the country, because then what Professor Azar talked about, that we need to recover our development. There is a lot that has been invested in our country, but then anytime we have a change in government, if it's not the same government, then it means that the projects that have been started by previous government become stalled. And that is taxpayers' money. So yes, the Constitution has made provisions for development. But how do we ensure that that development is a development that serves the nation? So I'm very happy with what he proposed, that we need sustained public demand. It must come from us. Without us demanding that things are done the right way, we will not get it how we want. We'll have someone start the foundation, and the foundation will be there and it will be rotten, and we have to build again. It means that is more taxpayers' money being invested to build another foundation. So that is my view on that. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much, Professor Rosina. All right, so because of time, we want to be very snappy. Dr. Osai, let us come to the current realities and consequences. Professor Azar argues that, okay, let me put it this way, that we have had 9 elections since 1992. under the Fourth Republic. So in your view, has alternation of power strengthened party ideology or just entrenched duopoly?
Thank you very much.
Kindly check the microphone for Doctor.
Yes, thank you very much. How do I answer this? The 9 successful elections, 4 of which has resulted in party turnover, is one of the, for me, the good things that have happened as a result of the Fourth Republic, right? That if we situate ourselves within the context of our neighbors and some of the electoral challenges that they have faced, a lot of credit goes to our political parties for not just being able to go through 4 elections, but the turnover in generally peaceful ways, in that there's been this political settlement that the ballot box is how we are going to change governments from time to time. But there's also a paradox about that successful 9 elections, right? Which is, as Prof said, you still see governance and development stalled. Even when there's a turnover elections, you continue to see enduring features in terms of political and administrative behavior over time. And so whilst the elections have produced, quote unquote, certain positive outcomes and have enabled us to peacefully change governments from time to time, certain features of our governance architecture continues to endure. You really don't see radical changes in political behavior and in administrative behavior. So it's like a double-edged sword, right? In one way, these elections, have come with its positives, but then it has also come with certain challenges. The last thing I would add, though, is that our political parties have also found a way to make sure that the growing disenchantment with them is tempered by some of the things they do offer in terms of policies from time to time. So no matter how dissatisfied citizens grow, every so often you can point to a few things that when political parties have won power in terms of public policy, they've tried to implement. FQ, free maternal health, LEAP, free SHS, progressively free SHS, free primary health care. So I think there's also a recognition that even as the parties, as Prof describes them, have become quote-unquote tribes and serve parochial interests and dispense with patronage, they are also smart enough to recognize that they can't completely drift away from their public purpose, which is delivering some level of development to citizens. So it's a sort of push and pull, constant tensions that, as Prof said, at some point it would take constant public demand through active citizenship to say that we just don't want a good policy here and there sporadically, so that when you realize that we are getting upset, you offer us something. It's like a kid, right? You get upset, your parent throws you a nice piece of candy, and then that upset goes on. No, but it has to be sustained. And that is where the recovery of citizenship comes in, to be able to make sure that elections provide us with sustained development outcomes.
All right, thanks so much, Doctor. That is very thought-provoking. Yeah, thanks so much. Professor Kingsley Agomo, when I was going through your, when Solidaire Ghana, during our preparation, going through the things you have published, your publications and some of the works you have done, you have spoken extensively on political funding. Professor Azar also made mention of the fact that there are some big men somewhere, who probably bring somebody, sponsor the person, and at the end of the day, whoever becomes president owes allegiance to those individuals. The professor mentioned that. in your view, and vis-a-vis the extensive work you have done, should Ghana consider state funding for political parties tied to strict accountability? Should Ghana consider state funding for political parties tied to strict accountability? What will be the risk and the reward?
Thank you so much for this very crucial and question. Yeah, it is true. My work really was my PhD thesis actually was on funding political parties under the Fourth Republic, supervised by Professor Buadi. So yes, where I sit, in course of my study, I interview a lot of party gurus, and what I discovered as far as funding political parties is concerned, it's a great concern, because he has rightly pointed it out in his discussion, his lecture, that you see, those who fund the party, they call for the shots. It's clear, it is true. And but state funding, your question on state funding, yes, state funding of political parties with a strict rules. It's a difficult question, and that this circumstance, the economy that we have, the situation that we have on our hand, there are two schools of thought. Others are saying that we don't have money for development and other things. Why do we give money to political parties to, do campaign? Other school also is saying that the state has imposed responsibility on political parties. Therefore, they should be supported. Yes, it's a very dicey issue. Why should the state fund political party? The reasons are very obvious that they play this role, or because of the wealthy people hijacking the party. That is very true. But why $100 million to political parties as a state funding? That may not necessarily stop them from getting money from other sources. The issue is this: how parties are funded, how they get the money. You see, it's very difficult to control. If you say they should not get money from rich people, how are you going to monitor that? I remember one of my interviews, I met one treasurer or a party chairman who said we needed money. And somebody funding the party asked them to go and park the car at Achimota Forest. And open around 5:30 p.m. when the weather is getting dark like that, you park the car there, open the boots, let your boys be just as if they are, doing something on the tire. Then they will drive, drive and go and put the money in the cart. No, it's the other way around. You just come there, you see this in there, you come and pick the money. The money they mentioned at that time, so much million. First of all, this money will not go to their accounting system. It goes straight to a certain class of people who know that this one has donated this. Whatever they will do with it, they will do with that money. So if you want to check the accounting system, that you check that, I'll give you state money, so don't go and solicit money for so. So how will you get this? So our system itself is so porous that we will not be able to control the state funding. again, something has been happening. You see that when NDC is in power or MPP is in power, they say on account there will be state funding. It's not on account of state funding. The argument is so simple. When you look at the theory of rational choice institutions, people make law to favor themselves. So why do I give somebody is competing with me, then I give him money to come and compete with me? It has been an issue. But with the kind of economy we have, the people we have, level of education, it's be really, really, really difficult. Really, really difficult to give them money and think that you are monitoring, you are checking. Because most of the political parties, they are not in for national interests. They are in for their selfish gain. They give them vehicles. Those days, some time ago, government gave them vehicles. Who has ever traced how those vehicles are used? Who monitored? And who? That's the question. Let alone give them money. Then you see that some of these parties, you ask yourself, NDC, NPP, why do you still have minor parties? They are not winning elections, but they are still in the system. Because there are benefits that they derive. Even though they don't win the elections, there are a lot of benefits that the laws, provisions for them. So they are not there because naturally, some human nature don't have. They are not there because of the nature per se. They have drifted, as he has said. It's a state capture. What will benefit you and any other thing. So I will know where I sit. State funding, in theory, we look at controlling their expenditure and all those things. But where I sit, the nature of the people, the education, the level of education, any other things, the system you have, it will be very, very difficult. It will mean that throwing away that money. Thank you.
All right, Professor. Okay, thanks so much. That is interesting. All right, just like giving a gun to your enemy. You one party giving money to the other political party to come and compete and contest them. Okay, that's just by the way. I think it's very interesting. All right. Okay, so I will respectfully jump Professor Rosina. I was going to ask a question which is going to cause a bit of a controversy. You know, the two dominant political parties, that is NDC and PP, and when you look at their ideologies, as a professor mentioned, you know, socialism, capitalism, you know, property owning, democracy, and all that. Whether they have lived those ideals. Unfortunately or fortunately, we invited the political reps at NDC and PP. Because they are not here, I wouldn't put you into any... so I will spare you for that. So this will be my final question to Dr. Asare. You know, looking at all the things or listening to what Professor Azar exposed to us today, you know, juxtaposing the challenges confronting us and then the reforms he actually proposed. Dr. Asare, so fast forward 10 years to come, or fast forward 10 years, if nothing changes in party culture, what is the single biggest danger to Ghana's democracy?
The biggest single danger to Ghana's democracy would be the continuation of politics as usual, and even a further and deepening entrenchment of the ills of the party system that Prof points out. And when that happens, you will have to ask yourself, what does that do for our belief in democracy itself? I have regularly argued that Ghanaians have made their peace with democracy based on certain things they have expressed over 10 rounds in the Afrobarometer survey. What we haven't made our peace with, as I argue, is how it is working and what it is delivering or not. And so that for me would be the biggest danger, that do we want to continue this cycle, even further deepen it, that pushes citizens away from a political system that it takes them to actually sustain it. The Professor Kwame Jechi, in his book Tradition versus Modernity, one of the things he said in his definition of democracy is that it also has to be a system where citizens are willing to defend it to the hilt. And if this kind of behavior continues and becomes more entrenched, when you call upon them one day to continue to defend democracy, what answer would you get or not get? The last thing I would add is there's also a bit of what I would describe as a tension in the minds of Ghanaian citizens in terms of how to treat or deal with our political parties. So if you look at the Afrobarometer survey and questions around political parties, as Prof mentioned, trust, whether it's a ruling party or opposition political parties, very low. When you ask, have you contacted a member, an official of a political party, very few people say they have. But on the other hand, Afrobarometer also shows that 7 out of 10 Ghanaians say we need more political parties. So Ghanaians have a choice, a real choice in who governs them. And only no more than 3 out of 10 say political parties are divisive. So there is also that tension where if we are going to recover these parties like Prof suggests, how do you reconcile some of these tensions in our minds? Because ultimately, they continue to play a role. It's just that we want them to play the kind of role that makes not only democracy sustainable, but we get the development outcomes that we want.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Asare. I think thanks so much. The responses are very thought-provoking. And then these are extractions from Professor Azar's presentation. It's more or less an analysis. I really appreciate the response by Dr. Asare, the final response. If nothing changes in the next 10 years, it will become politics as usual. Politics as usual. That is a very good response. He sums up everything. And you know the implications and the ingredients of politics as usual. Yeah, so on that note, we will give the microphones to, we shall take 3 quick questions from the audience. Your question must be brief, precise, concise, and straight to the point. So 3 questions from the audience. Any usher around? Kindly help with the microphones. Please, once you get up, you mention your name, and then you ask your question. Okay, so depending on the question you ask, we have political scientists, we have governance experts. So we will look at the panel members we have and where your question will.
Okay, my name is Jude Balmer from Election Watch Ghana, convener for Election Watch Ghana. And mine is more of a contribution.
All right.
Yeah, Election Watch is into electoral processes. And when it came to the political funding, Election Watch sent an RTI to the Electoral Commission to get the political accounting, the audited account that has been submitted to the Electoral Commission. You will be surprised that the big parties, they themselves don't even submit their audited accounts as required by the law. But the space here is the Electoral Commission don't have the powers to enforce or discipline political parties that do not submit audited accounts. When you look at the format for filling the political audited accounts, you have to show who gave you what, the person's telephone number, the account details of the person who donated to your political party, how you raise your funds and all that. They are all stated in the political requirements by the Political Parties Act. Now, when you look at this, Professor was saying that there should be an independent commissioner to run the political activities.
Sure.
Which we think that's what the country needs now. If you allow the Electoral Commission to do it, the Electoral Commission do not have the powers to do it. We decided to take it up and take it to the courts to see why by election year the two bigger parties didn't file their audited accounts. The only political party that filed their audited account was Ghana Freedom Party and Nana Kunedu Ajman Rollins NDP. They are the only political party that filed their audited account. And even if you look at the figures in their accounts, they are all deducted. Because a political party can't run a year spending about 12,000 cedis or 13,000 cedis for its party activities. These were what Ekweronko and Nanapu recorded. NPP, NDC, CPP didn't submit anything at all. Now, when we spoke to the lawyer, he said, no, you can take it up. But the electoral commission don't have any powers to, i.e., suspend or even prevent them from contesting. Now, when it comes to the political funding, they always look at the presidential elections. But there was no powers that the MPs should also submit their account to the district level electoral commissioner to know where they get their monies from to run their elections. That one was also there. And you know, these are a lot of vacuums in the system that needs to be taken care of. Now, when he asks Doc about the future of our democracy, the main problem is this AIIT introduced in our political system. Now, the political parties are able to collate elections faster than the EC. If the EC is not set up to build its systems to be able to collate the results faster than the political parties, I think our democracy in the next 4 years or 8 years will face serious political uprisings, civil resistance, and all that when it comes to election coalition. So we think our democracy should embrace technology, and the electoral commission should be given more powers to investigate the audited accounts, or independent bodies should be introduced in it to investigate the audited accounts. That's the only way we can save our democracy.
All right, I think.
It's not a question, but let me.
I think, sorry.
Yes,
it was a contribution.
You sum it up. Just as I said that I did small work there. It is true. First of all, if you are even doing a study, and you go to electoral commission, and you are asking them to give you the accounts that political parties have submitted, first of all, they will not even give it to you. It's difficult. You won't get it. Hold on. You hold on. Yeah, it's also one of the challenges. When I was doing my work, I had to find a backdoor. I worked with NCC some time ago, so I know electoral commission staff. Okay, this is unethical. So I did after I got my PhD already. So it is hard to pass backdoor to be able to get that audited account. They call it audited account. With my interview with party officials, they have 3 different accounts. One for EC, satisfy, constitutional or legal requirements. One for the general party members, and one account is for those in the kitchen cabinet, closed door. So you see, which one are they declaring? That one is also another issue. So yes, like I said, that's why I was talking about this party financing, this state funding. It is very, very difficult. So that is the reality. Those who fund a party don't give a big shock. Only few people are aware. That's why, like he said in his lecture, when it comes to Luti become repayment plan, I won't quote you directly. That is very true. So that's the problem we have for our political party system. And it's very problematic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Professor.
My question goes to
All right, so your name?
Me from CTFM.
All right, okay.
Yes, since Prof was talking about how political organizations are run, political parties, I want to ask of what his view is on how political parties in Ghana do not tolerate diverging views or dissent. And even the most recent example is some groups within the MPP calling for the expulsion of the Honorable Kennedy Japan. Do you think it's appropriate that the party should do that? Is there any historical antecedents for it? And do you think it must be encouraged? Or that our parties should do more to entertain diverse opinions?
Professor, yeah. No, to Professor Azar.
Yes.
Okay. Prof, did you get his question?
Yeah, I think
think-
you wanted to know whether the party should be more tolerant of dissent. Yes. Yes. They should be.
Yes.
I mean, not because I said so, but because the Constitution itself says so. Right? What's the whole point of having political parties if people can't even freely express their opinions? I mean, this whole notion of parties suspending people and all that kind of stuff, it's even against the mean to say you suspended somebody. Are you going to stop them from voting for you or what? I mean, it's completely senseless. So yeah, I mean, I think the Constitution says we should freely dissent, and nobody should be punished for talking.
All right. Thanks so much, Professor.
By the way, when the courts do that, the parties are upset. Why are you jailing this person and so on? But they want to constrain people from talking. They just don't want other people to constrain people from talking. So.
All right. Thanks so much, Professor. My brother, are you satisfied? All right. Hello.
Okay. My name is Resurrection, and I want to ask Professor Kwaku Azar, during his presentation, he made mention of, he said political parties were not meant to contend against each other, but to unite citizens. And in his awesome story, he made mention of the woman and the man fighting based on political whatever.
In the trotro.
In the trotro.
Okay.
So my question is it that citizens are being ignorant of what goes on when it comes to political staffs, or they are just not being exposed enough?
All right, resurrection. Professor Azar will resurrect your question for you. But I think when Professor was actually giving the recommendations, recover, number one is what? Resurrection. Recover the political party, the state, Parliament, the citizen, and then finally the development. So, he spoke extensively on that. Education, sensitization, orientation of the citizenry. That is what they were fighting in the trotro. MPP, NDC. They forgot that when they have their bigger cars in Accra driving in East Legon, the villages are also suffering. But that notwithstanding, Professor will resurrect your question for you. Resurrection. So, Professor, will you give all my responses? Okay.
Oh yeah, I think your response is adequate.
All right.
Citizens,
Please, the microphone, please.
Vote and support parties. But what I was highlighting was that the citizens are first and foremost citizens. You are a citizen of Ghana before you become a supporter of a political party. But most of us have it twisted, that they think it's more important to be a member of a party than to be a citizen of Ghana. And we need to reverse that. So I want us to think, is Ghana winning more than is my party winning? If there is a policy that will cause Ghana to lose, but will cause your party to win, where would you stand? I don't like it when people say, well, I'm on my party's side if Ghana loses. That's the point that I was trying to make. One of the things that breaks my
Prof,
heart,
kindly use the mic because we are streaming.
Yeah. One of the things that breaks my heart these days is when I see people wearing party attire to funerals. Like, it's funeral. Why can't we leave our party affiliation somewhere else and then mourn together? It's almost like the party stuff has gotten too much into our DNA that we are no longer thinking clearly about the issues.
All right. Thanks so much, Professor. Senior, your name and your question. You can also be specific if you want maybe Professor Azar or the panel. It's been answered. Can be answered by him. That's great.
So Professor Kwaku argued that political parties have drifted from their constitutional review justified. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so our distinguished professors who would want to assist our brother to unravel his mystery.
Repeat the question.
Senior, please come. Okay, so
be very
summarize it. Be specific.
Very specific.
Yeah, be specific.
Okay. So my question is that the political parties, Prof, the political.
But use the microphone. Use the microphone.
It goes on and off.
Is that so? Okay.
All right. So Prof said that the political parties have drifted from their political mandate of developing the country to capturing the state. And then my question is, in his view, or in any of your views, is this state capture backed by, or is it incentivized by our constitution or the political system? If yes, is the call for the 1992 constitution review justified?
So, in my view, it is more of a perversion of the incentive structure that has, or that fuels that drift away from development focus to state capture, right? That now that elections gives a party that wins access to the state and state resources, the choice that confronts a party for me is, do I want to use it for development, or do I want to use it to distribute patronage for those in my tribe? So I won't blame that on the constitutional architecture itself, as opposed to how the actors or the custodians themselves have chosen then to interpret the fact that, for example, the Constitution says we should have an election and et cetera, and whoever wins, forms the government. Are constitutional reforms, quote unquote, justified or needed? Yes, I believe that every so often countries would have to take a step back, reflect, and look at the fault lines of their constitution and fix them. But what I will say is that ultimately, whatever fixes you come up, new clauses, new provisions, deleting some, amending some, constitutions are inanimate things. It would ultimately fall on citizens, appointed officials, elected officials, to make the words on the Constitution, that is written on paper, come alive.
All right. Thanks so much. Senior, are you satisfied? Fantastic.
There's also history.
All right, so kindly give the mic to Professor.
Remember, I mentioned history. We operated a colonial system, or at least we were under a colonial system, and governance was about control. Then there were the liberation movements. It was about how do you capture power. And then we had military governments. It was all about, again, control. So historically, people have come to view the state as something that you capture, as something that you use to control other people. And we can see that in, as an example, because somebody talked about dissent and so on. But we've had freedom of expression enshrined in the 1992 Constitution forever. But it took, I think, the Kufuor government in 2000 to repeal the criminal libel law. And even after that, they have all kinds of laws that they enforce to suppress speech. But these are all colonial relics. You find these laws were in our criminal code long before we had embarked on Constitution, because the colonial people wanted to use that as a control. And then people today still want to use that as a control. So history is part of the problem. I like constitutions, and I'm all for constitutional reform and so on. But sometimes we tend to think that the answer is to reform the constitution. It's never the answer, because I mentioned the constitutional settlement between the NLM and the CPP on how you accommodate this federalism demand. They accepted it, but nobody really believed it. And so the first time they had the opportunity, they got rid of the regional assemblies. And before we knew, we had degenerated into a one-party state. So you can put whatever you want in the constitution. The operators, unless they believe in what they are putting in, we're going to have problems.
Yeah, thanks so much. All right. Okay, so all too soon we are coming to the end of the program. And then, as extensively discussed by Professor Azar, we have asked some very thought-provoking and relevant questions. And then we have actually received responses accordingly. We want to take final comments from our panel members. 1 minute will be okay, Professor. So 1 minute to Professor Agomo, 1 to Professor Rosina, and then 1 minute to Dr. Osai. Thank you.
I don't want to break the law. 1 minute is too small for me.
1 minute, 30 seconds.
Professor has spoken, and the issues emerge. 2 things I want us to look at as we live here. He spoke so much about institutions, and he took so much also on citizens. Where I stand, the problem is not about the political party. What you call institutions is very broad. What is institutions? The institutions by Douglas North is rules to constrain human behavior. So when we talk about institutions, most of the time we are looking at political party, other these things. But there are fundamental institutions in our society that failed, that is manifesting at our national level. The first one is the institution of family. All the people we are talking about, this man has done that, this is the way they were brought up, the family, how they were brought up. The fact that we are talking of political parties are corrupt, people are corrupt, I can assure you that it's not every Ghanaian that is corrupt. Okay? Most of them because of the family training, the background. So the institutions you are talking about, 2 major institutions has failed Ghanaian. 1, family as an institution. They are no more playing their roles, neglected. Some are even outsourced. 1 month, you go and drop the child somewhere. So the value system, value is institutions. Culture is institutions. Things that we have to imbibe and be a good citizen, they are missing. The other one that you also throw light on, that I want to just highlight it again, is the religious bodies. You see, religious institutions, they are supposed to work on our conscience. But these days, pay tithe, pay money. So repentance, what religious institutions are supposed to play, that role is also missing. So if we can go back to the drawing board, go back to our family system, and the religious bodies, those days, the traditional religious system, who dare you go somewhere? Who dare you go and steal? Because of the conscience. So when we are talking about political party, it looks as if they are organizations somewhere. There are people who are in the political parties. There are people who are operating in the parliament, all other places. If the citizens are work on, the institution, we start from a family, the citizens are well grounded. I think Ghana will make a way forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. All right, so this is, I will plead with Professor Rosina. You know, because she also doubles as the chair, I'll plead that the microphone be given to Dr. Osai, so that when you are commenting, then you end your concluding remarks. You know, use a stone to kill two birds. Thank you. I hope you understand me. Thanks so much. Doctor.
Yes. Thank you. So, for me, when you listen to everything that Prof has said, you are tempted to walk away thinking this is an indictment of political parties, and therefore we sort of have to shun political parties. But what I liked in the last part of his speech was that, look, these current realities of our political parties and how they've drifted is not a good thing. But there's still a way to bring them back. But to be able to bring them back, certain things have to happen. Of the 5 recoveries that he talks about, for me, the most crucial that would drive the other 4 recoveries is active citizenship. And not just active citizenship, but he says sustained public demand, right? The things that we want cannot be one-off demands. We want them today, we relax. We want them another day, we relax. It has to be a continued cycle of sustained public demand if we are going to be able to achieve these different recoveries, especially to bring our political parties back to how they were originally envisioned, both mobilization but also to drive development. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Doctor. All right, so Professor Rosina, we are taking your comment and then your concluding statement as the chairperson for the program.
Thank you. I think I'll do both. So this from this morning through to this afternoon, we have looked at political parties as they have evolved through seasons when they were incentivized by the ideology of building a nation. Along the way, when they became pragmatic organizations using whatever strategy they can use to gain political power. And through that, we have gotten into a situation where we describe it as a problem, a challenge, with various signs and symptoms and things that we see and we are not happy with, the monetocracy, the consancracy, and all that Prof mentioned. But there is still hope. There is still a way out. Of course, Prof has mentioned 5 ways that we can heal our system. As a democracy, we need political parties. So we need to strengthen the political parties. And if you want to contest, you need a political party. You can go independent. But you know if you use the political party route, it's more successful than when you act as an independent. But these are questions that all of us must interrogate. We must discuss together, things that we have to work on collectively. So right from recovering political parties to states, to parliament, to citizens, to development, we must work on this together as a nation. It must be of concern to all of us, especially as youth. We shouldn't just throw our head back and join the bandwagon and say that, okay, after school, I want to be a politician, as someone told me once on campus, right? So let's not just look at the situation and say, okay, I want to benefit from it as much as I can, but let's rather contribute to the solution. And I think that is how Ghana can move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Rosina Foley. We appreciate your time. We thank our panel members. Now, all too